Didn't know what he was doing.
The Shah's guests were ferried around in luxury coaches, unaware of the security measures surrounding the event. Fearful of terrorism or merely protest, Savak had rounded up thousands of people, loosely defined as troublemakers.
Because of the security, because we have to look after every heads of states or representative of that country, the security arrested a lot of people. They put them in prison. And I went to His Majesty. I said, they have arrested a lot of people who are innocent.
Persepolis had focused the attention of the world on Iran, but not in the way the Shah had hoped. After the event, human rights groups were flooded with lists of prisoners' names. They began to investigate and publicize claims of the detention, torture, and execution of political prisoners in Iran.
خدمت شما عرض بکنم که در اون سالها زندان یه چیز وحشتناکی بود. من یه چیزی میگم شما یه چیزی میشنوید. اصلا طرز برخوردشون، صحبتشون خیلی با ما وحشیانه و سخت بود. یکی دو بار انسان رو مثلا با پا 6 ساعت آویزون میکردن، 2 ساعت آویزون میکردن که اصلا انسان فکر میکرد که همه دنیا الان داره مغزش رو متلاشی میکنه.
An international campaign began which was to blacken the Shah's reputation.
He used to say to me very often, why is it that I get such a rotten press in Britain and Iraq does not? Saddam's Iraq. I used to say, and I still believe this, you get this bad press, Your Majesty, because you expect to be treated as one of us, as part of the Western world, whereas we don't treat Iraq as part of the Western world.
The Shah was baffled by the attacks, for at the same time as some in the West portrayed him as an oppressive dictator, Western leaders were urging him to spend billions to become the policeman of the Gulf. The Shah could never understand how he could be the object of both bitter vilification and sycophantic praise. But if he was hurt by the Western media, he had his revenge: oil. Convinced that the West had been getting cheap oil for too long, he worked within OPEC to raise prices. In 1973, oil prices quadrupled, and it was the Shah himself who in December of that year announced the latest rise. The Shah came to be seen as one of the West's chief tormentors, apparently taking particular delight in humiliating the British.
If you continue this way, a permissive, undisciplined society, you are going to blow up. You work not enough, you try to get too much money for the little work that you are putting up, and this cannot continue. It can continue for a few months, maybe 1 or 2 years, but not forever.
When he got a situation in hand where he had the whip hand, I can't say that he didn't enjoy that to a certain extent. After all, he felt that all through the years that he'd been Shah, that he'd had a pretty rough time. And finally the day had come when he had some assets. And I think anybody in his position would have enjoyed that. And he certainly did.
I always thought at some point our country was in a way that it was too good to be true. We were a country we had history, we had civilization, we had natural wealth, we had human wealth, which is so important. We had the security, we had the stability, so everything was happening in Iran. There was a bright future in front of us.
By the mid-70s, the Shah had all the levers of power firmly in his grasp. Government was a mere instrument of his will, and all power emanated from the throne.
The Shah was the only game in town. He was the fount of all power. He was the fount of all patronage. If you were in disfavor with the Shah, of course you could go and eke out an existence for yourself, but you really had to seriously limit your ambitions.
For the people of Iran, political life was a charade. There were two parties, nicknamed the Yes Party and the Yes Sir Party. These were ultimately replaced by a single party, known as the King's Party.
ببینید مشکل این نوع نظام ها همینه که خودشون افراد به اینجا میکشونن که یا باید 100% موافقشون باشید یا مخالفشون. خودش راهی نمیذاش که کسی اگر چیزی مثبتی هم ازش ببینه تایید کنه. خودش اینطوری میخواست.
By the mid-70s, the Shah had achieved an international standing far greater than anything his father could have dreamed of. The suitcase monarch of the 1950s was unrecognizable in the Emperor of Oil.
I think we were, to some extent, bedazzled by the superficial appearance of the Shah's control. Some of us, like myself, who had known of him back in the early 1950s, found it difficult to swallow the fact that he was a completely changed person. Others took it for granted that he was what he appeared to be. Strong, forceful, formidable, all-knowing, all-wise, totally in control. And this was the picture he presented to the world. I think in a sense we all accepted this, although some of us accepted it with greater reluctance than others.
We particularly welcome you and the Empress as good friends and old friends.
But even at the height of his power, the Shah remained an enigmatic leader. His imperious demeanor was often belied by diffidence, even shyness.
I am deeply honored, Mr. President, to be once again your guest.
He was the reverse of a charismatic man. He was a hopeless public speaker, wooden, boring. Put him in front of a crowd, his instinct was to withdraw. He was an introverted, really shy man.
I think he actually was basically a rather timid man behind that facade of imperial grandeur. Because of this timidity, he was as much a victim as a maker of his own image.
The biggest secret hidden behind the imperial facade was the fact that since 1974, the Shah had been undergoing treatment for cancer.
The Shah did not admit to having cancer while he was on the throne. If everybody had known that he had cancer, they would have understood what this real hurry was to shove the country into a more of a 20th century mode.
Looking for a shortcut towards the great civilization, the Shah had decided to plow all the extra money from the oil boom directly into the economy. Overnight, the 5-year plan was doubled, but after years of record growth, the country simply couldn't absorb any more investment. The benefits of Iran's economic miracle had always been unevenly spread, but when the miracle lost its potency, the massive inequalities between rich and poor were everywhere apparent. Economic insecurity and frustrated expectations encouraged many Iranians to look more closely at the so-called Great Civilization. Now that the glitter was wearing off, many were dismayed at what Iran had become.
و شاید این خطا و این که فکر میکرد قدرت و با بعضی اصلاحات اقتصادی، بهبود بعضی اقتصادی، مشکلات مردم حل میشه و دیگه کسی چیزی نمیگه. ولی شاید در اصل شاید بیش از حد به این قضیه بها داد، در حالی که نکته‌ای که تو ایران خیلی مهم بود اینه که حتی غرب زده‌های قبلیمون نسبت به این قضیه بسیار حساس شدن. یعنی احساس کردن که این گرایش به غرب دیگه هویتشون رو هم داره از دست میده.
It became fashionable to talk about West toxification, and it was understood that no one was more toxified than the Shah himself. His interests and his lifestyle all seemed to indicate a ruler who thought Western culture superior to Iranian. His religious critics argued that he was simply unsuited to be the king of a Muslim country.
بر اساس قانون اساسی مشروطیت شاه موظف بود که پاسدار تشیع باشه و عامل نشر تشیع باشه. خب شما تصور کنید یک کسی که از نظر قانون پاسدار یک فرهنگیه تمام زندگیش بر ضد اون فرهنگ باشه چگونه میشه؟ اینا رو مردم میدیدند. جرأت حرف زدن